My mistake. So, welcome in to the Pocket. I'm your host, Goon Green. Thanks so much for being with me here this fine late afternoon as we approach the evening, as I step back into this program that I hosted for quite a while on WVUM 90.5, wonderful station here in the Miami area, and so grateful to have the opportunity to continue this concept and continue sharing music, sharing culture, kind of getting deeper into the music and exploring lots of different artists and their thoughts. Definitely plans to get into some interview format at a certain point in the future. But for the first show here this afternoon, I just wanted to play some of my favorites. So that first tune that you just heard was actually the reason that I got into jazz, which to speak about this, because of course this being the first iteration of the Pocket on MCR, none of you listening have any idea what the show is about. But essentially the show explores different music that's in the pocket, put simply. Jazz and beyond, improvised music. I personally don't like to put the moniker of jazz on a lot of these types of music because I feel as though it's limiting. But improvised music and the cultures that surround that, some really, really interesting stuff to explore, and a lot of intersections between those different concepts, and so much to explore in the show. I'm greatly honored to be able to step back into it. The last time that I aired this show was on WVUM 90.5, wonderful station that I hosted the show. It was the reason that I started the show. But yeah, my last program was I think it was an 8 or 10 hour marathon program celebrating the music of Cuba, and I actually aired an interview that I had with Arturo O'Farrell, the incredible Cuban pianist and band leader, leader of the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra up in New York, and also started the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance and has been doing so much work in the community to make music education more accessible for downtrodden and marginalized communities. Really an incredible individual. But anyway, all of that to say that that last program was quite the program. I went into the wee hours of the night playing a lot of different music. But I'm now so happy to be able to have the chance to step back into the show and explore kind of a new era. So yeah, that first tune that I played, if any of you guys had a chance to listen to it right from the onset of the stream, beautiful, beautiful tune, one of the classic tunes, and was actually the reason that I got into jazz initially when I was, I want to say 7 or 8, listening on WBGO, which is the jazz station up in the Northeast, growing up an hour outside of New York City. And the tune's called Body and Soul. I always do this of just kind of dancing around and talking about the details and then not actually mentioning the name of the track. So yeah, it's Body and Soul for any of you guys who are unfamiliar with that song. It's actually the most recorded standard of all time, I believe, and rightfully so. Absolutely incredible writing. And Coleman Hawkins, the saxophone player that performs that version, it's just an absolute masterwork. And like I said, was the reason that I stepped into jazz. So being such, I felt as though it was appropriate to start off with that tune as we enter into this new era of the pocket. So with all that said, I think we're just going to step back into some music. We'll just be listening to tracks for today. In the future, hoping to bring in some people for interviews, explore kind of the deeper context of the music and the way it connects to the culture. So many different potentialities for information that can be kind of explored through the concept of this show. But for today being the first show, and in the spirit of improvisation, of course, being a show focused on jazz, I decided just to play some music that I have in my library that I think you all might connect with. So we're actually going to stick with this album of Coleman Hawkins, Body and Soul, and listen to another tune that's one of my favorites from way back in the day. Listened to it quite a bit, and it still is. It's the cut right before Body and Soul in this album, entitled She's Funny That Way. It features the vocalist Thelma Carpenter, masterfully done by her. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can just listen to the track. So, without further ado, we're going to step into She's Funny That Way, and then after that, we're going to step into some Charles Mingus, actually, who's another musician and individual who I've taken so much inspiration from in my life. Wonderful bass player, composer, visionary, progressive throughout the course of his life. Definitely going to dedicate some shows specifically to him and some of the projects that he worked on throughout the course of his life. But for today, we're just going to listen to a track of his from Mingus probably his most popular record, Fables of Faubus. So, She's Funny That Way, featuring Thelma Carpenter, off of Coleman Hawkins' Body and Soul. And then after that, stepping into Fables of Faubus from Charles Mingus here on Miami Community Radio. I'm Goon Green. You're listening and watching The Pocket. Remember to stay in it.
Not much to look at, nothing to see. Just glad I'm living and lucky to be. I've got a man crazy for me. He's funny that way. I can't save a dollar, ain't worth a cent. He doesn't holler, he'd live in a tent. I've got a man crazy for me. He's funny that way. Though he loves to work and slave for me every day, he'd be so much better off if I went away. But how can I leave him? Where can I go? He'd be unhappy without me, I know. I've got a man crazy for me. He's
Charles Mingus, live and direct on Miami Community Radio. You're listening to The Pocket and watching as well, and I'm your host, Goon Green. Pleased and honored to be with you here this afternoon as we explore some of the great jazz music released through the decades, honestly. We're probably going to jump around quite a bit, but started off with some Coleman Hawkins and Body and Soul, stepped into a vocal cut from that same record, and then just a moment ago, Charles Mingus from his probably the most highly acclaimed record, Mingus and the tune Fables of Faubus, which is a testament to Charles Mingus's progressiveness and his dedication to trying to spark changes in culture, and also the very political nature of his work and his mission as well. Essentially, Faubus refers to Orville Faubus, who was governor of Alabama, I believe it was, at the time that this was written, and he was essentially pro-segregation as all the schools were starting to integrate. So Charles Mingus wrote this song, as a way to essentially call out Orville Faubus for being the bigot that he was, and to try to mock him in a certain type of way. There's actually lyrics as well. I highly recommend checking out the recording from live at Cornell. The recording overall is incredible, but specifically Fables of Faubus, that live cut of that tune on that record is quite incredible. Mingus, just such an incredible artist, really an artist through and through, which some may argue isn't really an important distinction to make, but I feel, especially within the jazz world, there were those who filled in, even if they did some leader stuff in addition to their sideman stuff. And then there were those that really pushed the envelope and focused on innovation and creation for the sake of it, rather than trying to fit into whatever box, the critics or the public was trying to fit them into. So speaking of that energy, I wanted to step over to a record actually from a musician that Mingus himself worked with quite a bit throughout the course of his career, Eric Dolphy, incredible horn player, saxophone player, bass clarinet player as well, and a very avant-garde player, while still being extremely masterful, and received quite a bit of flack throughout the course of his career for his approach and how much he would step outside of the chord changes in various situations. And his life is kind of another testament to the relevance of cultural issues as it relates to jazz, which is kind of a concept that I'm planning to explore quite a bit throughout the course of this program. But essentially, he left the States because the States had so many issues in terms of opportunity, and there was something called the cabaret card, essentially, which you had to have in order to play gigs at different bars around New York City that had liquor licenses and served liquor, which is pretty much every single bar. So if you didn't have your cabaret card, you were pretty much out of luck in terms of getting gigs. And it was there were certain musicians who got theirs taken away for essentially racist reasons. Eric Dolphy being one of them, if I'm not mistaken. Just a terrible institution and a stalwart of bigotry throughout that period, which really was very, very relevant in jazz. It's something that I want to explore quite a bit. Of course, jazz and improvised music being connected back to New Orleans culture, Creole culture, black culture very expressly. And throughout the course of its rise to popularity and its propagation to the masses, there was such a kind of splitting of the whites from those black musicians from the side of the promoters and the curators and the critics and the label reps and everything. I was reading this one history kind of picture book essentially on jazz, and I kid you not, every single page had some sort of comment as to whether or not the white guys would have been able to do it like that. And every page, like every single page, obviously the author he was had his own things to deal with, but it was just really fascinating to me, the relevance of that and how much it was discussed. But anyway, I do want to finish the discussion on on Eric Dolphy just because after he left the States, he went over to Europe, which is what this record that I'm about to play is, Eric Dolphy in Europe, Volume 1. And he was fairly successful. There were a number of musicians who went out to Germany and Eastern Europe in that scene. Quite a few amazing records to come out of that. But essentially, he passed away in a really awful way, and yet another example of racism. He couldn't get away from it, unfortunately. But essentially, he was a diabetic and fell into a coma after one of his performances, was sent to the hospital, but the German doctors just assumed that he had OD'd, basically, because he was a jazz musician. So they just chalked it up to that and basically let it run its course, and he passed away. But it was related to the diabetes, and if they had just looked for that, then they would have been able to save him. So really quite an awful, heart-wrenching way for him to pass. But some really incredible music that he created throughout the course of his life. So I wanted to play the third cut off of this record, the classic tune entitled "God Bless the Child," and then after that step into an album from another incredible innovator within the jazz scene in the late 50s through the 60s, Ornette Coleman, and play something from his record, The Shape of Jazz to Come, which was very influential, a landmark record in many ways. I believe it came out in 1959. So, God Bless the Child by Eric Dolphy first, and then we're going to step into Congeniality from that Ornette Coleman record, The Shape of Jazz to Come, here on The Pocket, Miami Community Radio, the debut program. Thanks to everyone who's checking it out. It's much appreciated. Very excited about this project. So much potential, and it's been really beautiful to see how it's built up to this point. Had the launch event last Saturday with some incredible DJs coming to share some of their sounds and conceptions, and then had a stream on Tuesday with some really incredible selectors coming through to spin, and some more incredible shows after my show. The Rotation show playing local music, and then after that, Telex is going to do a live set here to close out the evening. But for now, Eric Dolphy and Ornette Coleman here on The Pocket. I'm your host, Goon Green. As always, remember to stay in it. Coleman here on Miami Community Radio. This is The Pocket, and I'm your host, Goon Green. Thanks so much for joining me to this point in the program. That last tune, entitled Congeniality, off of Ornette Coleman's record The Shape of Jazz to Come, released in 1959, I believe on Atlantic Records. Very, very influential record. Really made waves in the scene at the time. There were quite a few people who couldn't or didn't care to wrap their heads around it and basically dismissed it as hullabaloo. But Ornette was really onto something there. Really incredible stuff. Wish we could listen to the whole record, but I want to jump around to some different stuff. And before that, we heard from Eric Dolphy, just Eric Dolphy, a solo rendition of God Bless the Child. Absolutely incredible playing. And it was live, too. The claps at the end kind of threw me off. I forgot it was a live recording. Man, what I would do to have been in that room for that performance. Just masterful. The amount of technical control that you have to have over bass clarinet to get that kind of sound out of it and to execute those kind of runs is really unparalleled. Eric Dolphy is such an incredible musician. So, as we move forward, I wanted to step over to the debut album from another innovator within really the jazz and also fusion, really just music in general. Chick Corea, of course, passed away recently. Rest in peace. Lost him far too soon. Just an absolutely incredible musician, educator, and also a person as well. Just such a amazing energy. I didn't have the chance to connect with him. Wish that I would have had a chance to see him live, but from everything that I've engaged with, just absolutely unbelievable musician and composer. So this first record, or rather his debut record, entitled Tones for Joan's Bones, is a tribute to his wife, Joan, his then wife. I don't believe they stayed together, if I'm correct. But just a really amazing album, especially to come out of the gate with that. And obviously he would step into, more electric and synth-based stuff later in his career. Not too much later, really quite soon after this release. But this release definitely holds a special place, I think, in his discography and also in my heart. So the tune I wanted to play, entitled Letha, really, really interesting tune. I actually got introduced to it through an ensemble that I was playing in years ago, and it was quite a difficult task at first, just because of the different rhythmic shifts and trying to get inside of the connection between duple and triple meters, 2 versus 3 basically, and the way that those rhythms can interact and come in and out of them basically. So we're going to step into that tune, Letha, and then after that, I wanted to listen to some music from the pianist, composer, and educator who actually introduced the tune Letha to me in that ensemble years ago, Michelle Rosewoman, an incredible, very, very underappreciated pianist, composer, and leader. Originally from Oakland, California. She's living in New York now and has been for a while, and she essentially dedicated her life to getting inside of Afro-Cuban traditions. Her mother, Cuban, an amazing visual artist, actually. Her art is featured as the cover art of the album, from which we're going to play some cuts. And Michelle Rosewoman just getting after some very, very different stuff, and intentionally too. Just a very inspirational individual. Definitely opened up my conception about music and how to give myself to concepts that were maybe daunting at first. And I actually had the opportunity to speak with her a while ago about some of her life and some of the things that she thinks about with relation to the music and culture. So maybe we'll have a chance to maybe share some of her thoughts at some point later in this program, just because I was extremely inspirational for myself, and I'd love to share some of her perspectives. But with that said, we're going to step into Chick Corea's Letha first from Tones for Joan's Bones, and then after that into Michelle Rosewoman and New Yoruba, which is her essentially orchestra, large ensemble project, blending Yoruban culture and Yoruban rhythms with New York sounds and New York musicians. So Chick Corea and then Michelle Roseman, two incredible pianists, back to back here on The Pocket. I'm your host, Goon Green. You are watching Miami Community Radio. I'll be with you until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then after that, the Miami Community Radio Rotation Show, which will be featuring some exclusively local tracks from artists here in Miami, and then after that, stepping into a live set from Telex. So looking forward to that as well from 9 to 11 p.m. But for us, Chick Corea and Michelle Rosewoman, I'm your host, Goon Green. This is The Pocket, as always. Remember to stay in it. Michelle Rosewoman and New Yoruba here on and in the pocket, Miami Community Radio. I'm your host, Goon Green. Thanks so much for watching and listening to this music here this fine afternoon as we approach the early evening. This is The Pocket, which is a program that I hosted for quite a bit over at WVUM 90.5 FM, South Florida's alternative voice. Wonderful station. Explored quite a bit of different concepts in music during its tenure there. And I've had a little bit of a hiatus from the show in the last, let's say, 8 to 10 months as I've been focusing on manifesting other projects in my life. But now extremely happy to be able to get back into this show concept and share some music and culture with you all. And just to listen to it myself is pure bliss, frankly. That last tune, entitled Puntia's Gift, preceded by the title track, Hollowed, from, of course, the record entitled Hollowed, from Michelle Rosewoman and New Yoruba. Really incredible ensemble. They recorded very infrequently. They actually were formed back in the 70s and played for over 30 years before recording a record. They recorded, I believe it's called 30 Years Later in 2015, I believe the year was. And then 4 years after that, this record, Hollowed, featuring the compositions of Michelle Rosewoman, some absolutely masterful compositional work from Michelle Rosewoman. And just to explain some of her goals and what she's kind of getting after as an artist, it's actually quite connected to the name of that last track that we listened to, Puntia's Gift. Essentially, as she started getting more inside of Afro-Cuban culture and tradition as it related to music and rhythm and everything, really, that's something that I have immense respect for artists and individuals who take the extra step to really give themselves to the culture from which they're trying to extrapolate some sort of musical knowledge or information and inform their own artistry. Because it's one thing to, pick and choose little things and make some cool different music with different ideas. But it's another thing to really, really get inside of it. And especially a culture like Afro-Cuban Yoruban culture and also Abaquá culture really behooves you, I feel like, to really invest yourself and your time in understanding all of the intersections of culture and humanity and music and dance. So essentially, when she started to get deeper into that stuff, she connected with this individual, Orlando Puntia Rios, who was really one of the purveyors of the Abaquá tradition in the New York scene in the early 70s, where the Yoruban culture had already been present for a number of years, and Dizzy Gillespie and Chano Pozo had already kind of started the ball rolling in terms of connecting Western concepts to those Yoruban traditions and rhythmic ideas. But the Abaquá side had really not been explored very much. So Orlando Puntia Rios was really the source for all of that. And Michelle Rosewoman, being so invested in giving herself to the music and the culture, decided to connect with him and worked with him throughout the course of I believe 2.5 decades of this group, New Yoruba, until his tragic passing towards the end of his life, and learned so much from him throughout the course of the time that they worked together, and implemented it into her compositional style from there. So this record, Hollowed, is essentially a 10-track suite, a Yoruban suite, where there's the bata rhythm underneath everything, the bata being 3 different drums. It's connected to Yoruban culture, and it's very spiritual and religious. It's not just something that you can pick up and start playing, and the musicians who you heard on that record playing it are absolute masters of staying inside of one another, and the depth of understanding of the rhythm is mind-blowing, frankly, because it's one thing to be able to mechanically execute a rhythm, to be able to make a rhythm happen, but it's another thing to really be inside of that rhythm and be able to mold it and jump out of it and come back into it, which is something that, of course, every musician in this group, and Michelle Rosewoman especially, not to put her above the other musicians, but just the way that she dances around these different rhythms harmonically on the piano, and then as she steps out into melodies and improvisation, it never ceases to amaze me. So if you listen to that whole record, those first 10 tracks, I think there's maybe 12 or 13 tracks, some of them are standalone, but the first 10 tracks is a complete suite where there's various composition, various melodic ideas that all have this underpinning of the bata drums with those rhythms staying consistent throughout. So definitely looking to explore more of her music in the future. Some incredible solo releases as well, and some quartet stuff that she had put out throughout the course of her career that I would love to share with you all at some point. So just to mention it once again, I'm Goon Green. This is the Pocket show exploring jazz, improvised music, Latin music, world music, even though I hate that term, and all the intersections and also connections to more modern conceptions, and exploring the tangible connection between music and culture and those that fall in between those two ideas. So as we move forward, that last Michelle Rosewoman album being released in 2019, we're going to stick with some more recent releases and listen to a release from 2020 from Brian Andres and his trio Latino. Brian himself on piano and joined by some incredible musicians on drums and bass. And this album entitled Mayan Suite, and I wanted to play their rendition of the classic standard Someday My Prince Will Come, the Frank Churchill composition. And then after that, we're going to step over to the Gabriel Alegria Peruvian, Afro-Peruvian, that is, Gabriel Alegria Afro-Peruvian Sextet, which is an incredible group, flies under the radar, and their rendition of yet another incredible standard, My Favorite Things. So, Someday My Prince Will Come, as played by Brian Andrus and his trio Latino from Mayan Suite in 2020. And then after that, stepping into My Favorite Things from Gabriel Alegria and the Afro-Peruvian Sextet here on the Pocket Miami Community Radio, live streamed onto our website, mcr.watch. Feel free to peruse through the residents' bios and headshots, and we recently published the FAQ, frequently asked questions, that you can peruse on the website as well, and you can also reach out directly if you have more specific inquiries or if anything isn't specifically addressed through that FAQ. So, without further ado, Brian Andres and Gabriel Alegria Afro-Peruvian Sextet, live and direct on The Pocket. As always, remember to stay in it. Man, talk about an arrangement. My Favorite Things, as arranged and performed by the Gabriel Allegria Afro-Peruvian Sextet here live and direct on Miami Community Radio. Thanks so much to everyone for sharing in this experience as we explore some different music. This last set, two very well-known and influential standards as played by two different Latin-orientated situations. Like I said, that last one, Gabriel Allegria alongside his Afro-Peruvian Sextet from their record 10. And an absolutely incredible arrangement, and also the way that they get in and out of these different ideas and manage to break it down and then come back into it. Definitely has shades of course, the recording of My Favorite Things that brought it into further awareness within the jazz and improvised music scene, which was, of course, John Coltrane's recording of the tune, playing soprano saxophone and stretching on it quite a bit. Really a beautiful tune. I'm actually teaching the melody to some of my students right now, so I'm very familiar with it at the current moment. You'd think that you'd get tired of it, but it's just too beautiful of a melody. Really quite a beautiful melody. Of course, originally composed by Rodgers and Hammerstein for The Sound of Music, a musical which some of you might be familiar with. And as many show tunes, songs from musicals during that time, it was used by jazz musicians for the chord changes, for the melody, what we refer to as standards, basically. Many of those come from musical theater and were developed and progressed through the years. Definitely a very interesting institution of jazz that it calls so heavily upon those compositions, but yet finds a way to make them all new and breathe life into them with various arrangements. Of course, the musicians themselves bringing in their individual conceptions into the music and changing the energy of the standard based on the recording, based on the moment. Of course, even the same group is never going to play the same tune the same way twice. So, yeah, it was quite the tune. And before that, we heard Someday My Prince Will Come, another great standard, one of my personal favorites, composed by Frank Churchill, I believe for Snow White, the film, actually, and then was adapted most popularly by Miles Davis. It kind of brought it into the popular conception, and then, of course, many musicians after the fact had their stab at it. We heard from Brian Andres and his trio Latino for that cut. And now as we move forward with the show, this is To Mention It, The Pocket. I'm your host, Goon Green, with you on Fridays from 4 until 6 p.m. here on Miami Community Radio. This is the first program on this platform. The program, The Pocket, has a longevity going back a few years, but took a hiatus looking for a platform that I felt would be congruous with the energies of the program and my own energies as well. So it's a great honor to be here with MCR and with you all as well, sharing this music, and so much to get to in this show overall, and still some music left to enjoy here for us this evening before we step into the MCR rotation show, which you shall stick around for as we explore some local tracks from exclusively Miami artists, essentially being Miami Community Radio. That's going to be at 6 p.m. right after this program. So, as we move forward, I wanted to step over to another innovator and very important figure within jazz, and especially in the contemporary scene. And it's funny that I say within jazz, because he actually, I'm speaking of Christian Scott Atunde Adjua, just to mention that, because I always go on these tangents before even mentioning who the musician is. But Christian Scott Atunde Adjua, incredible trumpet player, also an inventor of quite a few different experimental instruments, reversing the shape of the horn, messing with different kind of physicalities of the horn and how it's built, has created some really interesting sounds. But what I was saying earlier, is he's a really interesting figure because he himself is very, very deeply connected to New Orleans culture. He's actually the chief of a black Native American tribe, as was his uncle, Donald Harrison, who was actually an alto saxophone player within the jazz scene maybe 50-odd years ago. But Christian Scott has really been pushing forward the music over the course of his career in these last 2 decades. But he makes this important distinction in his conception where he believes that a lot of the music that's being pushed out as being jazz, the new jazz, et cetera, doesn't really have a tangible connection back to the culture and tradition of jazz in the New Orleans and Creole culture, but rather is more so creative improvised music is the term that he likes to use essentially, because of course it's still improvised and there's still artistry to it. But to call it jazz is I think, kind of a misnomer in many ways, and I think is also some of the reason why there's a kind of misunderstanding as to the direction of where jazz is going. And this whole discussion is that too many things are being looped into that categorization when they really don't have a connection to the culture that jazz really came from. Of course, since the tangibles of that culture are not really so much around anymore in terms of the clubs and the cutting sessions and all that stuff doesn't really exist in the way that it did when jazz was at the forefront of the scene. More so moving to academia now, of course, over the course of the last 50 years or so, and progressively so. But at the same time, incredible innovation is being made within the music, but just important in Christian Scott's estimation, and mine as well, because I concur with him, to not just lump everything into this idea of jazz, but rather to consider them as kind of separate creations, and to just think about that idea of creative improvised music versus jazz. Really nuanced discussion, and one that I would love to explore more deeply in the future. But just to give you guys a little bit of a insight into where he's coming from as an artist, and kind of what he's trying to get after. So we are going to listen first to actually a record that he did in Cuba with Stefan Harris on vibraphones and David Sanchez, the incredible saxophone player. It's quite the trio of musicians, I must say. And this project, really, really interesting. They essentially traveled to Havana for, I want to say, maybe a month or so. Of course, the name of the record, 90 miles, referring to the distance between the coast and Havana. Very, very short flight, exceedingly short. But yeah, they essentially went there to connect with Cuban musicians and record, and then they had a live performance as well that was recorded. And there was actually an accompanying documentary that they filmed while they were there that I did a lot of work to try to dig up, but it doesn't seem like it's accessible anywhere. I don't think it was finished, although at the same time I did find an archived mention of it in the BBC airing record, so it seems like it must have aired at some point, but could not find any trace of it whatsoever, even went so far as to email old producers on the record to see if they had access to it. It was kind of a dead end, I guess you could say, but if anyone happens to know where the documentary is for 90 Miles, I would absolutely love to at least view it once, if not have a copy of it. But irrespective of that, the audio project is quite incredible, so we're going to listen to the second cut off the record entitled Esha. And then after that, we're going to step over to one of Christian Scott's original releases, which is when he introduced his Native American name, Atunde Adjua. Now he goes by that, Christian Scott Atunde Adjua. So the name of the project is his own name. And we're going to listen to the tune New Orleans, parentheses King Adjua Stomp, from that record. So Esha from 90 Miles with Stefan Harris and David Sanchez alongside Christian Scott Atunde Adjua first, and then his own solo release with the tune New Orleans Stomp, or rather New Orleans King Adjua Stomp, here on The Pocket, Miami Community Radio. I'm your host, Goon Green, with you until 6 p.m., so we don't have too much more time, but going to enjoy the music while we're here and stay locked into MCR.watch as we transition into the rotation show, playing music exclusively from local Miami artists after this show concludes. So, without further ado, Christian Scott, Atunde Adjoa, live and direct. This is The Pocket. Remember to stay in it. New Orleans from Christian Scott Atunde Adjoa here on The Pocket. I'm your host, Goon Green. Thanks so much for joining me for the program. I've been with you live and direct here on Miami Community Radio from 4 p.m. until now. It's the first show here on this platform. Hosted this show on 90.5 FM in the past and took a hiatus looking for a new platform. And really incredibly honored to be able to restart the program now, and lots of plans for different interviews to have and different ideas to explore, really getting deep into the records and talking about everything relevant with regards to them. But for this first show, in the spirit of, as Christian Scott would say, creative improvised music, I wanted to improvise a little bit and bring you guys some a selection of different songs that I've connected with throughout my listening experience, and hope you all found some connection with at least a few of them. And it's always a pleasure to listen to music and be able to share it with others. The process of music discovery, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful and fulfilling processes in life, and it's also something that I feel is very important to maintain that human element where you're really connecting with people, showing them a track, they show you a track. You know, the algorithms are helpful, and you can get into the web and find all this different kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I've found through just various random channels, but that human connection really makes a difference, which is why a platform and an institution like community radio is so important. Because it provides that netting for all of those interactions to manifest, and for music discovery to be given its due diligence in terms of maintaining that humanity, the soul to it, that feeling of just finding the track that you really, really like, and you know that you're going to listen to it a lot. So it's a great honor to be able to engage and participate in that process through this platform. I'll be with you every Friday from 4 until 6 p.m. Might transition my show to Sunday evening time at a certain point, but of course I'll let you guys know when that happens. So for now, it's going to be Fridays from 4 until 6 p.m. You guys can tune in every week, or not every week, or never. It's all good either way, but I am very much appreciative of the support from those of you that were able to tune in, and lots of plans here at the station for this show individually and for the station overall. And looking forward to getting into all the different things that community radio can manifest. So as we approach the end of the show, I wanted to play one more track, and then we're going to transition into the MCR rotation show, which is essentially a show where we just play exclusively local tracks from different artists, and especially artists who aren't really being given the platform in other areas. So those underground artists within Miami, and contemporary artists, you know, people who are in the scene right now trying to make things happen. Of course, the classics, we'll bring them in here and there when we can, but really giving that emphasis on new music for the MCR rotation show, which is going to be Fridays from 6 until 8 p.m. right after this program. So, as a way to transition into that show, actually, I wanted to play not a new release, but one of the classics from a South Florida native, Jaco Pastorius, who came through Frost, an incredible bass player, influenced an entire generation of bass players to this day. Everyone's trying to get after the Jaco sound. Just an incredible, incredible musician. Definitely need to dedicate a large portion of a show to him and his music and his journey at a certain point. And a very difficult journey it was, certainly, but some incredible music that he recorded and created throughout the course of his life. So as we transition towards the MCR rotation show, I'm going to step aside. I'm Goon Green. This has been the first program of The Pocket on Miami Community Radio as I start this new journey, and really looking forward, like I've said many times, but it rings true time and time again, to all the future shows and all that we can explore together here through this platform. So, like I said, as a way to transition into MCR, we're going to listen to Jaco Pastorius and actually a previously unreleased cut from his record that was released on the compact disc version, and it's simply titled 6/4 Jam. They didn't release it, so they didn't have to think of a name, but it's an apt title. And with that, I'm going to step aside in terms of hosting, and I'll see you guys next week, Friday from 4 until 6 for The Pocket. And stick with the station after this tune for the MCR rotation show. And also later on in the evening, from 9 until 11 p.m., Telux is going to be doing a live set for us. So very much excited for that. Be sure to stay connected with MCR and peruse the website if you so desire. And with that, into Jaco Pastorius to close out the first program of The Pocket on Miami Community Radio. I am Goon Green. This has been The Pocket. As always, remember to stay in it.